I am so excited to be here with someone I respect so much, both personally and professionally, and ready to kick off the conversation. So let's get started.
Let's
Ready?
do this. Absolutely.
Great.
And welcome everybody. I love seeing the
So
chat and where it's all
exciting.
coming from. The fact that like you're at 1 a.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever, this is a testament to the power of what is happening in the world that we live in. So I cannot wait to get started.
Great. So let's start with our first question. How do you think technology has impact, sort of what is digital transformation, digital leadership, that's the space that we're talking about today. So how has technology transformed leadership and sort of what does it mean to be a digital leader today?
So let's just take the word transformation. So when you think about the word reformation, which is a lot of things that we do in education or in the world, we just want to reform. To means to redo. It means to do the same thing and make a little shift or a little nudge here, nudge there. And it almost always doesn't work. Transformation means that what you end up with is fundamentally never going to go back to the same thing. Think about a butterfly. So a butterfly is an example of a caterpillar transformed. So a butterfly will never revert back to a caterpillar, and it will never ever just be like an iteration of a caterpillar with putting wings. It's a completely different being. So when we think of transformation in a digital sense, from whether it's a leadership perspective, a learner perspective, an industry perspective, we are fundamentally different in every single way. We not only are using different tools, different platforms, different mediums, we are as human beings different because of this. We learn differently, we lead differently, we work differently. It is a fundamental shift in how we operate every aspect of our lives, from getting groceries to making dinner, to ordering food, to connecting with friends, to the way that we work. And so I think that that's an exciting thing. It can be terrifying because complete transformation is letting go of what we know best. And as human beings, that's hard for us to let go. So how would you define it, Nancy?
I mean, similarly, I think it's being open, it's agility. So I think very much about, the concept of always learning, right? Or just in time.
Yes.
I'm very much a just in time learner. Always challenged by, and anytime I'm faced with something or problem or something that I haven't encountered before, I see that as an opportunity to build, my skill set or add to my toolbox. And I think that there are so many new opportunities available in this space to be able to do that, right? So constantly being agile about your mindset, right? About your skill set, I think is how I would approach, thinking about being a leader in the digital space. I think those are really important concepts and things, to really incorporate into how you lead, right?
Absolutely. What you brought up is what Deloitte defined as this era of transformation, that this is the 5th industrial revolution. And this revolution is human driven. So when you thought about automatically, you didn't talk about the tech and you didn't talk about the digital, evolutions that came. You talked about what you needed to do personally as a human being to succeed and thrive in this space. And I think that's really important. We are in a place of power as human beings. This pandemic sort of put an exclamation point on bringing our attention to the human elements involved in transformation. Everything from the self-awareness needed, the personal responsibility needed to reassess your not only skills, but your mindsets, your capabilities, the way you interact with other people. That is a huge part of this revolution. To embrace it means to embrace what it is that makes you uniquely human. It is not your digital capabilities, it is your human abilities that are going to mediate these platforms and these places. And I think that's it, truly exciting. And it keeps me grounded and keeps me hopeful, because I believe in human beings. We're in the business of believing in human beings.
So I'll put, Angela has a great TED Talk. If you've never watched it, I encourage you to watch it. But I'm also going to give a plug to someone else that we both know. And that reminds me of Brian Kramer when you think about human to human. So, what his mantra and so much of what we've learned from Brian is that it's not business to business or business to consumer. It's always human to human. And even within this space, it's like, I think the way to be successful, like you said, is always to remember that it's not about the technology or any of that. It's always about relationships, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I think that is one of the biggest elements of disruption that the pandemic has expedited, if you will, or brought attention to, is when we think of digital transformation. Because we use the word digital, we are looking at, oh my gosh, this onslaught of new technologies, new platform. But really, it is a shift in power. That is the absolute biggest disruption. It is shifted from the organization defining everything to it being the people defining. There's something happening in the world right now. I'm not sure how it is being described in other countries, but in the United States, it's being described as the Great Resignation, meaning that because of the temporary work arrangements that people had during the pandemic, working from home, working remotely, less meetings, less conferences, the normal day to day, people are deciding, you know what? I'm not going back to work. And it isn't about the technology. It's about, I've had this time to realize that I am going to demand my human rights be valued. And human beings during the pandemic had time to think about questions like, why am I doing this? Why didn't we do this before? How can we do this better? Is what we're doing, does it even matter? Do I even matter? And those questions are shifting the workforce, absolutely shifting the workforce, and making organizations, or at least smart organizations, step up and say, we need to rethink that. Unless we meet these human conditions, it doesn't matter what technology we're offering. It doesn't matter even what salary we're offering. People are fighting for their human rights in a totally different way because of this digital disruption.
And I think we'll talk about that more later, because I think that's
sorry.
so important.
I know I'm off.
No. But I want to come back to that, because I think that that's a really important point. And I think even one of the things that I came across was that you need to reinvent the social contract with your employees. So not just about individual mattering, but they want to be able to connect to the mission of the organization, and they, what the organization believes in, and what the social contract that the organization has with the environment, right? And with their employees. Absolutely. So I definitely want to put a pin in that and come back to that later.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's talk about some of as a leader, right? So in this space, it's it's a constantly shifting environment. What are some of the things that leaders need to be aware of, or what's some advice you would give to people who want to lead a digital organization?
I'm going to sound like a broken record during this, but if you are not a self-aware leader or a self-aware organization, you are in massive, massive trouble. And there's a difference between whether it's a large organization or a small organization being brand aware. So a lot of there's a mindset of like too big to fail, like that McDonald's has great brand awareness, but the question is, do they have self-awareness? Do they understand how their employees are feeling, how their customers are feeling, what they wish? And I'll give you a very immediate example that's 1 mile down the road from me. The largest grocery store chain in many, many states is a grocery store chain called Kroger. and it has a bunch of like King Soopers is what Kroger is in Denver.
In Colorado.
In Colorado.
Right.
And so down the road, 1 minute away, I cannot, well, I can if I wanted, but I walk in my grocery store and it is lined with 10 security guards and 50 people picketing, and they're fighting for human rights. They are fighting the organization and saying that, yes, you have big brand awareness. You're the largest grocery store chain, but you don't have awareness of what the conditions are like for us, the employees, the front line. The public needs to know. The companies trying to say that this is an issue of just wages, but it isn't. I've actually talked to the picketers, when you talk to the actual individuals, both the ones that are working and the ones that are outside picketing, it is about being treated as a human being, being honored, being appreciated, being respected. And any leader, whether it's a large organization or a small, that thinks that these are like piddly issues, that these are small issues that can be, smoothed over or fixed with, a little teeny like surface level recognition, is seriously mistaken, because people are going to, not only are the individuals there going to get their voices heard, they are rallying with Facebook posts and news coverage and moms talking to other moms and other grocery stores talking to grocery stores. So people are hyper aware that this company is basically tone deaf. They're not listening. And that's the key. The employees want to be listened to. They want to feel heard. They want to feel like they matter, whether they're sacking groceries or they're the manager of the night shift. And we have to start taking those human conditions extremely serious as a leader.
And we're going to open for questions in a minute. My last point on this is, I think, relating to technology, it used to be that you couldn't get an audience, right, with maybe the CEO, but with the technology that we have today, it's leveled the playing field, right? So on like right, and so it distributed power, and you need to open yourself up to those types of encounters, right? Because good ideas come from everywhere, and we now have the ability to hear those ideas, and we should make ourselves available and open to receiving that type of information.
And just to build on that really quickly, because I hope this comes up in the questions, it can feel, especially engulfing all of this technology, all of this disruption, large industries, large companies, you actually can feel smaller and shrink into the power that you have, because you think, who am I, this single voice, to be able to say something? But recognize that you actually do have the upper edge. There's no such thing as a voice unheard anymore, that you can use as individuals, these platforms, to bring attention and awareness and rally people around things that we need to be aware of and talk to. And never before did the little people, just the everyday average customers or average learners, have so much power. And that's the shift that I think some parts of the world don't want us to know is existing. They want to make us stay small. And I'm imploring you, now is not the time to play small. Now is not the time to shrink into what you think other people are going to expect. Now is the time to come into your power. And it's very, very, very important right now.
And I think as a leader, that ability to be an active listener is, we talk about soft skills, right? It's not an easy one, right? But it's so important. And opening up the channels to really hear what people are saying, I think is really important.
Exactly. So I know we need audience questions. Nancy and I get all excited, but I would love to hear from you. What's resonating? What are you thinking? What would you like to add?
Yeah, so that was some really insightful, intense discussion in the first 15 minutes really, but lots of insightful things. I think the point about McDonald's, for example, that's like so true. So we're going to go ahead and take some questions now. So just a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions for Angela and Nancy, just pop them in the Q&A box in your control panel. You can also like your favorite questions in the Q&A, so we'll get to answer the most relevant ones. Okay, so it looks like we've got quite a few questions already. So we have the very first question we had from an anonymous attendee. How do I convince my team that it's important to be data literate? I mean, they sort of know, but they don't take the next step, which I think is quite a common like obstacle that we all have. We know it's important, but how do we get over the fact that, you know, it's something we have to do?
I think you have to live it, right? Because you have to, I mean, I was going to talk, it's so funny. That was such a good question because I was kind of talk about data-driven decision making, right? But as a leader and to be a leader in the digital world, you have to be comfortable with data and making decisions based on data. And, you know, and so, you know, dashboard, you know, we used to talk, I studied, you know, information systems. We talked about executive, you know, decision support systems, but those things are now kind of accessible to everybody. That's so having good data, making sure the right, you know, that data is an equalizer, right? It's not, it's a commodity, right? And so you have to, you know, you have to be trafficking in that commodity. You have to be living it. So as a leader, I think you have to lead and show people that that's how good decisions are made with data, right? So I think it's critical today.
And Ling, did the question come say data literacy? Is that what someone said, that word, data literacy?
Data literate, yeah.
I love that so much. So if you think about literacy, there's 3 component parts of literacy, and that applies whether it's financial literacy, critical literacy, web literacy, data literacy. The first is being able to consume and comprehend what is being shared. So you have to understand when you get a statistic or you get a number or you get a conclusion from data, you've got to understand how to comprehend that and what that means. And that's part of like any literacy. There's a syntax to data. There's a syntax to what that percentage means, or what it's asking critical questions. Whose voices were represented? Whose voices were not represented? What was the sample size? Like very specific things. So there's a whole skill set, a literacy set of interpreting and comprehending the data. So that's one piece of data literacy. The second piece of data literacy is the ability to not only receive and comprehend, but to be able to translate the data in a way that your community will understand it. So I know that, because I'm a data nerd, that if I just presented the statistic or presented the data and didn't translate it in the language and form and syntax that my community would understand it, then like I need to compare it to something that is in their world, or I need to show an image of it, or I need to, you know, show something concrete. If I just showed the raw data to them, it's gonna be there's gonna not be trust there, because it's like a foreign language to them. So there has to be a translation, and that's important. But here's the third part of data that very few people talk about, or a part of literacy that very few. The real key to power and literacy, because literacy isn't reading and writing, literacy is power and privilege. What unlocks the power of literacy is the ability to rally others around your conclusion, around your belief. This is where your interpretation matters. So being able to humanize the data. Here's why this statistic matters to you. Here's why this is important. Here's why you need to ask the following question, and get people talking and invested and personalizing the data that matters most, because we can drown people in numbers, counting on their hesitancy to be data literate, because like, I'm not a numbers person, I don't care. We need to care. We absolutely need to care, because data isn't neutral, because the people performing the elements of that data are not neutral. They are very specifically asking certain people and not other people. They're very specifically leading with a statistic that mirrors what makes sense to them, with knowing that people aren't going to dig deeper. This is power to the people. We need data literacy as urgently as we need other literacies.
And I think to your point, we need diversity in the people that are being represented by the data and in the data science teams. I mean, I think that's something that's really important, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys therefore
absolutely.
have like more sort of concrete tips for leaders or managers to actually sort of start implementing a
Yeah, so I
data-driven
think
culture?
you may not be a data scientist, but you have to know how to manage data scientists. So there's, like Angela said, I think there's different levels of literacy, right? And so you, I'm not particularly a numbers person, but I like computer science. So it's how involved you're going to be. But even if you're not doing the statistical analysis, you have to be able to manage people, lead people who are doing that work, but then also the organization, like in understanding and acting upon the data. And it's a little bit more real time than it used to be, because we used to do quarterly reports or annual reports, but now, you know, dashboards are real-time data. So I think when we were talking about agility, that's where some of that comes in, the ability to be proactive and not reactive. And that's, I think, what being data driven, you know, when we talk about data driven decision making, I think that's the goal, right? Is to be proactive and not reactive.
I just want to add one quick thing is data doesn't always have to be complex. And I think in education, we have embraced complexity, where in the business world, they have almost gone the complete opposite. So what I would consider human data is as realistic and important as statistical data. And I'll give you just two quick examples. In my original research in the foundation and science of mattering, this field that I've been embroiled in for 15 years, I asked 500,000 students, kindergarten through 12th grade, one question: what would make you run to school? What would make you run to school? And then we oriented that and asked 22,000 of the largest employee network the same things to employees, 22,000 fields. What would make you run to work? And we compared their human responses, the foundation of which we could support in medical data, in psychological data, in economic data. But at the end, it doesn't take a data scientist to know, are your people happy? Are your people productive? Are your people engaged and excited about your brand and your mission and your purpose? Zappos, $150 billion company, asks one thing of their employees, no matter what field: can you make another human happy today? And if you can't, what do we do so that you can accomplish that single mission to deliver happiness? And if they can't, the data is very clear that it will crush this absolute ecosystem if one person and one interaction doesn't deliver happiness. So Zappos doesn't fire you because you cannot deliver happiness to another person. They pay you to quit. That's how important that single question is. So data doesn't have to be this complex, really, multi-level thing. When you have to trust those human capacities that must be present, when people, I don't need to know the statistics to walk by King Soopers and see that people are disheartened, that people are scared, that people just want to be heard and seen and honored. I could get data from that, or I could just trust who I am as a human being and be self-aware and aware to know, are people happy? Are they productive? Are they running to work, or are they talking about dreading it? So don't underestimate different kinds of data, because we've set aside that only one kind of data is accepted. So my 2 cents.
That's awesome. So we're going to move on to our next topic,
Yeah.
sort of focusing on more, what are some of the tangible skills, right, that leaders might need, and how technology can, really empower leaders. So yeah, what are some of the skills that you would say are different for leaders today than might have been in the past? So yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. So first I want to deconstruct the word skill. So my background is in linguistics as well as neuroscience. So I'm a word person. Just the idea of skills has to be sort of disrupted, because a typical skill from the beginning of time was a competency that you mastered. So you practiced it for a certain amount of time. So
And you checked off the
so
box, right?
yeah,
Right, I have it, done,
multiplication,
boom,
a
right.
skill. So once you understand 2 times, I was going to say 2 plus 2 is 4, but 2 times 2 is, wait, 2 times 2 is 4 too. Oh my gosh, then you shouldn't have to, go back, and you can check it off the box. That is the most disruptive shift, is the things that we're calling skills, to me, are really power competencies, power capabilities. I hate the word soft. I won't even go into that because there's nothing soft about them. But these
Those are the hard
competencies,
skills.
yes,
Every time
it's
someone says
so
that, I'm
hard.
like, wait, those are not the,
Oh,
they may
it
be
makes me
soft,
cringe.
but they're not
Yes,
easy.
no softness.
Right.
Yeah, but to me, these competencies are not only essential leadership skills, they are essential human skills. So just to give you an example of the shift in focus. So when you think of a company like Google, you might think of, well, the number one skill is going to be coding. The number one skill is going to be computer science. The number one skill is going to be, understanding algorithms and mathematics and whatever. So of companies like Google, 69% of the world's most influential and admired companies value curiosity, agility, and passion over performance, skills, and their career and education history. So that just came out by Deloitte in the last 2 weeks. So
And
that tells you something.
I've seen curious. So in so much
Yeah.
curiosity keeps
Yeah.
coming up, right?
Think about what you said, Nancy.
Right.
Your first reaction as a leader to the disruption is, I have to be a learner. And the foundation of learning is curiosity. I have to ask questions. I have to propel my learning. I have to deepen my understanding. Look at what we just talked about with data. The foundation of literacy is curiosity. So
Right.
we need to be asking all of these questions so that we're seeing something from multiple dimensions.
So like we talked before we started, I mean, I
Yeah.
mentioned that, we've seen kind of this evolution even in the digital space. So first you needed a network, right? Then you
Yeah.
had to build a community, but now you have to manage an ecosystem. So
Yes.
like as a leader, how do you approach that? And, we hear about, collaboration and all this stuff,
Yeah.
but like, what does that really mean? Like as a leader, how do you share that? How do you, embody that, within your organization?
Well, I think that I can keep going back. The most underrated power competency that a leader and a learner can have is self-awareness. And it is, so what is interesting, if you research the data on self-awareness and you asked leaders across industries, or you asked learners, are you self-aware? 98% of them would say, yes, I'm self-aware. But
Right.
98% are not self-aware. So it's the complete opposite of data, because self-awareness is a hard thing. It isn't just analyzing your skills and your weakness. It's understanding from a 360-degree lens how your perception, how other people's perception of you influences their behavior. And when we talk about personal branding, it's a huge thing. So just the definition of branding alone is not what other people say about you. It's what's said about you when you leave the room. So to really understand and embrace anything about your brand or you as a leader, you have to understand and take into account how you're being perceived by your actions, by your invisible communication skills, by what you say, by what you do. And it takes a very, very competent person that is secure in who they are and what their values are. And most of the time we have managers who manage behavior but don't lead. There's a huge difference between a manager and a leader separates themselves by self-awareness.
It was so funny. One of the things that, I was reading an article and, talks about like different digital leadership
Yeah.
skills. And
Yeah.
one of the things was moving from mandate to conversation, right? Which is
Yeah.
kind of like what we're
Yeah.
talking about, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
being open, you have to be
Yeah.
self-aware and self-confident to open yourself up to hear
That's
what
right.
people are saying, because
And take it
you have
in
to
and
be
really listen.
open to the criticism, because it's not often people are, what they're saying might be critical, but it's not personal, right? It's meant
Right.
to advance the organization. And think you have to be confident enough to be able to separate, right, out what you're hearing as not being, separate out what's personal from what can actually move the organization forward.
Absolutely. So Nancy, there's a term in education that's used a lot, which I don't love. You're going to think I hate all words, but only words that are used in education mostly. But it's called SEL. SEL. Have you heard of that? Just type in the chat if you've heard of SEL. And it stands for, in an educational context, social emotional learning. It's, as something that is like, here's real learning, and then here's learning that is associated with emotion. So I want to take that concept, SEL, and kind of compartmentalize what is new in terms of digital leadership. That you need to be a socially, emotionally aware leader, understanding group dynamics, understanding individual dynamics, having high emotional, high EQ, emotional intelligence, understanding that people's emotions drive everything. It's not like, did I cry at work today or did I smile at work today? How you feel emotionally, if there's congruency emotionally, then you've got people that are coming to work as their best selves, or coming to the group as their best selves, and understanding how to moderate that, how to facilitate that, how to delegate other people to do that. What I'm loving is the new job titles that are coming. So I typed in, this is with IDEO and Stanford Design, some of the newest, hottest jobs in the digital age. This is my favorite, an emotional proofreader. That no email goes out in the company without the emotional proofreader reading it first, because of all the damage, because we haven't been in person and we can't just say like, this is what I meant, or somebody can see your facial expressions or body language. There are people that are not emotionally aware and intelligent, and they send something that has profound, often traumatic impact on the organization. So there's actually a job called emotional proofreading. There's another called a joy cultivator, or the chief joy officer, the chief enthusiasm officer. That used to be like a silly thing that Zappos did. But now across every company, from NASA on, understanding how to sustain a joyful, optimistic, hopeful work environment is an essential digital capacity for a leader, whether they delegate it to somebody, like doing that, or that they are able, it's a small enough organization, they're able to do it on their own. That signifies that not only is there a new skill set that is being emphasized, it has become a leadership imperative to integrate this not only in their own behavior, but in the behavior of the people that work with them and under them.
And I think that's so much more important now,
Yeah.
because so many people are working remotely. I will tell you, in my most recent job search, I only was looking for a remote position. Like, that was
Absolutely.
a requirement.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were workplaces that had shifted temporarily, and I think that's still, open for conversation. But I truly enjoy, I feel like I flourish in this type of environment.
Yeah.
And it was really important to me. But that concept of the chief happiness officer, with the Great Resignation, it's so much
100%.
about cultural, relating cultural competency,
Absolutely.
right? In the organization, right?
And it's not somebody who comes in and does like fun things, or or does like an activity, like a team building activity. This is somebody who has the pulse on the social and emotional dynamics of the workplace, of the community, and embeds processes in the DNA of the organization to sustain meaning, to sustain camaraderie, and to sustain human conditions that
it can't be bolted on. It can't be bolted on, like, in it. We're talking about value add. It's not even that. It needs to be part of the organizational culture, right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, I think, Ling, are we time to pause for some more
Oh, I'm
questions?
so excited to see what you guys think of this. Oh,
Um,
I'm
got lots of questions coming in.
Great.
So
yes,
I
I'm
think
reading the comments, you guys. They're great.
I think this is a big one. So we
Yeah.
have quite a lot of people asking about, the real world applications of digital transformation. And we know we've got so many different sectors in the world. So we're going to keep it general and just ask, how can the leader apply digital transformation to their specific sector? Like any quick tips?
I don't know that they're like, I mean, I think there are nuances, right, for each sector, but I don't think the basic skill set or what we've been talking about doesn't apply to every sector, right?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think these are just, it doesn't matter. I mean, just education, for example, right? Look
Absolutely.
at how education is transformed from, strictly, face-to-face, classroom based to now, fully online. Look at Nexford, right? Fully online, global type of university, very different. So, but the skills to operate within that environment are not necessarily different. I think they're different than they were in the past, but I think a digital leader, you can apply those skills, certain in every domain, right? So I think what we've been talking about, being an active listener, being a data-driven decision maker, being an agile, an agile leader, a lifelong learner. I mean, those are skills that are necessary to lead in this time, in this space, regardless of what field you're leading in.
100%. Going back to think about the new era of tech is a new era of humanity, that this revolution is human driven. So the things that we honor and hold most dear to the most admired human beings in your life are their integrity, their honesty, your ability to trust them. All of those things not only make you like them or admire them, they make you want to work hard for them. They make you want to contribute in a way that you haven't. And when leaders are not transparent or they don't demonstrate honesty and integrity, when they default to conformity and not take courageous things, not only do they lose respect, they lose trust, which trickles into not having loyalty, which leads to a great resignation. Why would I commit to, why would I run to work for this person when I don't trust this person? I don't believe this person. I don't believe they have my best interest in mind. I certainly don't think they care. And you think, well, that's got to be a very few amount of leaders. No, that's a huge amount. That's a huge percentage of organizations and leaders. If it wasn't, you would not have so many disgruntled, disengaged, absolutely desperate workforce to do anything other than what they're doing right now. If you had these power competencies, which are all about social and emotional dynamics in human beings, the ability to garner optimism, garner hope, garner trust, resilience, integrity, you would follow a leader that has even one of these traits. You would follow them through a storm and not think twice. So it's really
I'll put a
important.
plug in for another person that Angela and I both know. So Ted Rubin, the whole concept of return on relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's all about that. Everything is based on that the human connection, that building of the relationship. So, don't think about it as sales, it's all,
Everything is human.
your success is all based on your
Yes,
ability to build relationships.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Any other, I'm trying to read, there's so many great comments in here.
So we've got
Anything else?
one question that keeps popping up.
Yeah.
We've got Vanessa, Falajimi, and Yusuf.
Yes.
They've both asked like questions that are sort of in a similar vein, and I'll try and summarize. So basically what they're asking is, in some areas, digital transformation isn't as advanced. So how can they still unlock the power of digital transformation?
I think by leading, right, by showing what's
Mhm.
possible. And I think
Yeah.
that's what I have always done, because I think I've always,
Yep.
technology kind of resonated with me, and I actually entered higher ed in the online space. And I think a lot of it is just, I was a sort of a product evangelist for a software company, and that was really, it was all about like showing people what's possible. And I think
Yes.
you know, don't tell, show. I think that's
Exactly. And to build on that, that's a trait. That's one of the power skills of a really, really profound leader, is they don't try to convince and convert you to conform. We have to do this. You must implement this. Even listening to their language, you are mandated. The word mandate is not going to win in the end. You might, by coerciveness and control and power, what you do is you paint a different picture of the future. So there's a set of authors called Dan and Chip Heath, and they talk about companies that are stuck, and how do you shift and change during the hardest times. And they describe an activity in there called the postcard activity. And that what you do is that you make the reality of this destination, this new destination, so intriguing. So let's say it's going to a beautiful, island in the Caribbean. Do bad things happen in that island? Is there an off chance that, I don't know, a coconut's going to hit your head and you have to go to the ER, that you may drown while you're snorkeling? Yes, there's a statistical chance. And you can lead with that data to scare people to conform, to either go there, not go there, or you can paint and showcase the beauty of this new place because you've been there. You took a trip there first, and convince them to go with you because you have these skills of trust and loyalty and integrity and transparency, and you have proven that you have their best interest in mind. And then you show them a new experience. And if they don't like it, they'll go back. But you have to take their breath away with a new experience. And that is going to get you much further than trying to convince and convert them that they need this, or they must do this, or that you're going to mandate this because you're the boss. That does not work in human behavior over time in every context. It works for a small amount of time, but eventually people revolt when they are not honored as human beings. So whether
and
that's
I would
really the
say
government or that's
a
an
thread
individual.
like through all of this, which I think we haven't specifically mentioned, but when we talk about soft skills, right?
Yeah.
To be a leader, you need to be a storyteller, right? So you
Yes.
need to
Yes.
be able to tell stories to convince people, but also when it comes to data, that's a big part of it, is using, data to tell stories. The way you convince people, right, is by being a convincing storyteller.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a great
Great.
question, you guys. Great questions.
So our last kind of subject area topic, and then we'll open it up at the end for some more questions. So this will kind of be a power round, a lightning round. So like honing in on some of the more specifics, right? So
Yeah.
how do leaders actually connect with their people? Like what are, some tangible maybe recommendations that we would make for people? One of the things we talked about maybe in a next webinar is more about how you brand yourself. I know that,
Yeah.
and that's something that Angela and I both invest quite a bit of time in.
Yeah.
She's probably better at it than I am, but branding and networking. So my whole professional network, and it's been tremendously powerful, is in LinkedIn, right? So,
Yep.
I like social media. I love, but like when I really talk about where the value that I get, like as a digital leader, it's my network, and I've invested a lot of time in it, is in LinkedIn. And not only that, it's like not just being connected, but bringing value, to
Absolutely.
your, and I always try to do that, is I'm kind of like a connector. That's, when you think about like roles that you play, but that makes me happy, is when I can connect people, or make opportunities
Yeah.
that might not exist for people. But I think again, like not just, and I think we're doing leaders, right? And I always see myself as that because I like to do. I'm a very much a task kind of oriented person, but I think you have to, you know, lead by example. And for me, that's very much not just telling people what to do, but doing myself.
Right. Absolutely. So I think, Nancy, even more concretely in what you said, because what part of what you said is who you are as a human being is an extraordinary human being. Like there's no way that you could be watching you right now and not be in love with you. Like you have such extreme
It's a mutual admiration society. So you guys have to know
I
that.
think even
right.
for leaders that are not likable like you, and that you think, well, I don't have that personality, but what you can do as a leader at any level, at any place, as a human being, in a time in the world where your reputation is your strongest asset or your greatest liability, is to be consistent. Be consistently who you are, so that when
Authentic,
somebody
right?
argues that you're different, you have evidence. And when you really know that you've been extremely consistent. So I think the biggest, like self-aware awakening for me is somebody hijacked my LinkedIn page or like hacked it. And I ended up getting like 100 messages from people. Angela, that didn't sound like you. That did not, I know this isn't you. Or you've had the times where on Facebook, you'll get a phishing scam where somebody will say, this is Dr. Nancy. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like her at all. So consistency is your greatest leadership asset and safety net, because they know who you are, because you have been transparent, operated with integrity, showed courage, resilience, vulnerability, all of those things. But you haven't done it just one time when it served, or because then that brings up flags. But you are consistently who you are at the fullest level. You're not trying to be somebody else. You're not trying to over instate what you do. You are honestly self-aware of what your gifts are and strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And you're not shy about describing either of those. And you do that consistently, and people will be loyal to you. They will follow you. They will listen to you because you have consistently demonstrated that you care about them, that you listen to them, that you are who you say
And when
you
I
are.
talk about, like, you know, and that is true, because I, you know, when I lead people, I'm very much a mentor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, I've had a wonderful career, and I have maintained those relationships. You know,
Yeah.
I've stayed connected with people, you know, from the very first instant. I still am very, you know, connected, and that's very meaningful, you know, to
Yes.
me. So I think like, but and authenticity, you know, I think,
Yes.
you know, with my leadership, with me as a like, you always know where you stand with me. There's no,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
You know, I really bring my authentic self, and sometimes
Yeah.
that's good, sometimes that's bad,
Right.
but
It's who
I
you
am
are.
who I am, right? Right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And you're not trying to be and compete with somebody else. You're trying to bring your best imperfect self to the world every day. You're not trying to operate like everything is great. Like, you know, I laugh a lot of times. I'm like, I'm a hot mess most of the time.
Right.
Like I really am. But here's how I function. Here's what stays. There's nothing like perfect about my life. And yet but what drives me every day is my purpose and my belief in humanity and my conviction to forward it. I think the best definition of, or the best purpose of technology, what I believe it was invented for, is to advance our humanity. And we control that. Does what we're doing advance human beings? Then that's a technology I'll buy into.
So I think we have a few minutes left. Ling, do we
Yeah.
want to open it up for,
Yeah,
you know,
please
just the
do.
last round of
Ask
questions?
away.
Yeah, let's do that. We've got tons of questions, so cool. Let's jump right into it. So one of the more popular questions I see is from God Day. Hope I'm saying that right. He is asking, please could you outline an easy approach to migrate from the traditional leadership approach to leadership via the digital platform? I mean, like, what are the biggest obstacles? Which I think is very applicable, especially in today's remote working that if you are, if you've got someone new joining your team and they live halfway across the world and you've never met them, the first time you meet them is on Zoom, how do you make sure they feel welcome? Any tips?
I think the same ways, so I think it's processes. I'm a very process oriented person, but it's really, having processes, and it's all about, we go back to this presence, right? So it's being there. I actually think personally, with the systems that we have today, it's actually easier to, be that guide on the side, or be that support person, because we have more insight, I think, into, as a leader, good and bad, you have more insight through systems, to be able to see what employees are doing, help, provide assistance, and make resources available. And it's not, and I think part of it is being humble, right? So it's not just you, right? But being able to delegate, right? You have to have the self-confidence to delegate. And just going back to a point, a lot of this came to me, I'm in a much different point in my life and career, having experienced everything that I've experienced. I mean, it hasn't always been a smooth road for either of us, but a lot of it is learning. You learn from every experience, and I actually think you learn more from adversity, because you have to pick
100%.
yourself up and move on. And
100%.
I think that everything happens for a reason. And in my life, every time I faced adversity, I've always come out with a better result on the other side. But getting through it is not easy, and that's where resilience comes in.
It speaks to Namiti's question. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name right, so I apologize if I'm not, but she's saying being vulnerable is not easy. How do you handle that? And I think that's a really important question. I am much more vulnerable now and much more transparent now than at the beginning of my career. I was, and always have been from 5 years old, a people pleaser. I wanted people to like me, but you soon realize, and I hope that I can share with you to realize it sooner than later, the goal of leadership is not to be liked. You have friends, you have family, and you surround yourself with people who will unconditionally love you and be there for you. So now my intention is to make an impact. So just going in to anything that I do, whether it's a piece of writing, whether it's training, whether it's speech, whatever it is, it really was my goal to get all 5s on the evaluation. Now, if I don't, I look at that as I can gain, I decide, am I going to ignore that? Am I going to use that feedback to take action? Are people, there's just some people who will never like you, who will never believe in you. If you are a leader who needs to be liked, then I think you get that part of your life settled, that you find an incredible network of people who will lift you up, who will inspire you, who will compliment you, who will love you no matter what, who will push you, and let that be your core. It doesn't always have to be your family. And sometimes they're not the best ones. They like you the least. But your goal as a leader is to disrupt. Your goal as a leader is to make an impact. And you don't do any of those things without making people uncomfortable. So you have to spend time on you and understanding what you value, what your line of uncompromise is, what you're needing and willing to stand firm on, even if no one else agrees with you. That's not what leadership is. Managers try to please everybody. Leaders lead knowing they are absolutely not going to please everybody, that they're absolutely, if they are liked by everyone, then they're not doing something wrong. That's right. Yeah. And that's a hard thing. Why? And it doesn't mean that you have to lead in like a whole tribe of 10 million.
That doesn't mean you can't be liked, but that's not the goal of leadership.
I would rather be respected than liked. I would rather be like somebody to say, well, I don't agree with what she said, but here's what I know about her. That is about every time that consistency in leaving your legacy as a leader. But the word disrupt doesn't have the word like in it. So there's a reason for that, which is why very few people choose leadership. It is lonely. It is hard. It is brutal sometimes because you start doubting yourself. You have to find out who you are at your core and do that deep personal work so that you can lead others. You can't lead others on the surface with you wavering on what you believe, because it's too easy for other people to sway.
That's also why there's a whole field of executive coaching, right? Leaders need those people that they can count on for advice. Like I can't count on Angela for advice.
Yeah.
So.
And Nancy, yes.
So this is a perfect time for this question that just literally popped up. It's from Denladi. So this person's asking, how do you, because what you just mentioned, Angela, a leader doesn't aim to be liked, they aim to be respected. It's not their job to be liked. But at the same time, you also mentioned previously that it's important to have, a positive and working environment where everyone feels like they can communicate. So this person is asking, how do you as a leader effectively collaborate with followers and more senior leaders to produce an effective and joyful work environment?
I think that's a hard thing, because there is a line between leading and collaborating and what do you call it? There's another C word, like, I can't think of it right now, but where you're just like hanging out with people. And it's really hard when you are, I think that's what's really hard, like to be a trusted leader, an authentic leader, like you might eat lunch with the staff and you might eat, just collegial, but you cannot be somebody's colleague and be their leader at the same time. There has to be a differentiation because you're not in charge of just that relationship. You're in charge with the mission and vision. It doesn't mean you're mean. It doesn't mean you don't like people, but I think that's a big leadership mistake that I've been in and been hurt by, is because I was too friendly with my staff, or too close to the people that I was trying to lead. And I didn't separate that. And I'm not separating that from an elitist standpoint, like I'm up here and you are down here. You're separating it from the leader's charge is organizational. It is visionary. It is uncomfortable. And it's making sure that others trust for you to follow. And I think one of the helpful strategies, and I've always believed, to me, this is the definition of leader. My job is not to gain more followers. My job is to create more leaders. So I've worked really hard to create multiple leadership positions within the organization or within the system, so that I'm not the only leader, because that's really, really tough.
Yeah, Nancy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, managing up is a lot harder than managing down.
Yeah.
So regardless where you are in the organization, right? It is not easy, and that comes part of being confident, right? And having the good, like being data driven, so that when you make your argument or you present a case, or you're, lobbying for resources, you can tell a good story and you have the data to back it up, right? Those are the two things that really matter, I would say. So.
Hey, thank you both. Well, we've talked a lot about leadership, I think almost in like a corporate context or within like a bigger company. And we've got this anonymous attendee who has asked, as an entrepreneur, how can they leverage today's digital transformation to improve their startup?
Can you repeat that question?
Angela's an entrepreneur. So
can you repeat that question, just because I heard entrepreneur and startup, and that's a whole different environment. So
I guess as an entrepreneur, how can they leverage today's technology and digital transformation to improve their business?
So it depends on the business you're in as an entrepreneur. So if it's a service business, or so being an entrepreneur of a product or a mission is different than being an entrepreneur of like a tangible product. So that makes a huge difference. So I'm an entrepreneur, but I don't have a tangible product. Like I'm not selling a juice, or I'm not selling a technology app. I'm selling a vision to people, if you will, and created a social impact startup. So can you give me more information? Because I guess the question is, the route is understanding, going back to literacy. How are people going to receive what I'm selling, if you will? How are people most likely to trust it? So my biggest asset as an entrepreneur using digital technologies is as a learner and a listener. You can't help people until you hear them. I'm going to say that again. You cannot help people until you hear them. So using an entire suite of social tools to listen to the community that I'm seeking to serve. What are they saying? What is top of their mind? What are their biggest pain points? What are they worried about? If I can't relate to that, I have to bring in somebody who can relate to that. If I'm not, so right now my kids, so let's say I was selling a product to parents. My kids are grown. They're out of the house. As much as I was a parent 27 years ago. It is very vastly changed. I was a teacher. It's very vastly changed. So I need to bring in somebody that is in that space right now to confirm, to help me with languaging and how I speak to them, so I don't disrespect through my lack of understanding. And I'm really transparent. I'm not a parent now, but here's what I'm hearing you say. Here's what you're talking about. Here's what matters most to you. Am I right? So the tools in the beginning have nothing to do with productizing or marketing or pushing out my product. 90% of the tools I use in the very, very beginning and throughout are listening, data collection, sentiment tools to help me deeply understand what it is that my community needs, and being self-aware enough to say, do they really need another app? Do they really need another thing? And if I can say, like, I can't justify adding that to their plate, I need to step back and rethink, let's do this differently. So that's what I would say about entrepreneurism.
And I'll just piggyback on that. So, what we're talking about is sentiment analysis, and it's part of artificial intelligence. But, it used to be a lot harder to listen, but there's a whole suite of social listening tools.
Oh my gosh.
And that's kind of what we're talking about. But
Yeah.
so
You guys have
sentiment
any examples?
analysis is a whole part of.
Yeah, if you typed in Google right now, top 100 social listening tools, you would get 1,000. And these are just the top 100.
Right.
And a lot of them, like you said, are free. And so there's literally no excuse to be out of touch with the community you're serving. And remember that as an entrepreneur, your impact is directly related to how you can absorb your community's pain, how you can lighten their load, how you can increase their efficiency and capacity to do what matters to them. It is not about you. And so many startups that I work with, so many products that are all about, this is my big red flag. This product is great. This product is great. When they do not talk about the customer at all in the first conversation, I say to them, I'm sorry, I'm not the right person to help you. I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to be, because the fact that the customer is not at the forefront and it is consumed by how great your product is or how new, well, you know what? There's a million other ones like that. And you could have a lesser product, a lesser quality than XYZ. But if you show more compassion, if you show more that you have heard them and that they are listened to, you will do better 100 times out of 100 times. Would you agree with that, Nancy?
Oh, I definitely would. I definitely would.
Yeah.
And, just, being open to new, like,
Right.
we didn't have TikTok, when we were starting, but being open to, or to maybe to not succeeding at everything, right?
Right.
You have to be vulnerable, being open to being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think sometimes we learn from our mistakes or our failures or bumps in the road, but being willing to try things and learning from those experiences, I think is the key to success in this space.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. I think a human touch, especially in this day and age when everyone's
Right.
Human
haven't seen.
revolution.
That's
Yeah.
true. Cool. Yeah, we're sort of running out of time. Do you two have any, as in, do you want to take one more questions or
Yeah,
do you have time?
of course, I'll talk about this forever, but you probably need to let people sleep around the world. But yeah, if you want
That
to
is
do
true.
a question, I'm good with that.
This is one question which I found really interesting.
Sure.
It sounded a bit more technical. There's sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Moji Sola is asked, can the principles of change management be applied to navigating leading a digital organization?
Sure, I mean, the principles of change management are, relevant in your personal life and professional life. But yes, because, as a leader, you're usually helping navigate the organization through times of change, right? And so you have to be able to, and that the concept of being able to convince people to be a storyteller, that's all part of change management. So
Yeah.
you have to be able to manage change. That's a big part of being successful as a leader.
Absolutely. One of the jobs, speaking of that, one of the like top new jobs was, oh, let me find it. I wrote it down because I love the name, frame shifter. And that's the essence of change management. It's not throwing everything out, it's shifting perspective. It's shifting a paradigm. So it's Seth Godin, my friend and mentor, calls it poking the box. You have to be willing to poke the box from all different sides, not just throw out everything and start new and this was terrible and we got to redo it. So I think that's a huge part of it, and that's hard. Shifting people a very small amount is emotionally, physically, psychologically, soulfully difficult because our brains are not wired for that. So you have to really understand that you're not just fighting people's mindsets or attitudes, you're fighting biology. You are literally fighting biology when you are asking human beings to change. We are wired, our brains are set up to protect us and keep us in our safe zone, in our comfort zone. And so you have to be very knowledgeable about human behavior and what drives it. So you don't take it personally.
Hello?
When people are being
Hi.
obtruse about it. So yeah. All right. Excellent. We got a ton of great questions and people are like, when's the next one? When's the next one? I'm like, we are on it. So just type in the chat. Like we're thinking
Can you just give me 1 second?
possibly a webinar or a series on having a digital presence on your own in whatever role you play, whether you're a leader, you're in a learning role, you're a part of an organization or a team. Having a digital presence is absolutely important, and touching on what Nancy said, the power of networking, the power of personal branding. If that is something that would be of interest, it would be great feedback for us as we plan further.
Yeah, and also just before we say goodbye to our lovely audience, Nancy, Angela, do you just want to quickly just share with us like where our audience can connect with you? Is it Twitter, LinkedIn? You want, Angela, do you want to go ahead and share?
Yes.
Yes. So I put in there, like I am most active on Twitter. So I put my Twitter in there. LinkedIn is I'm not as active, but I will be, like, I'll be looking. I do all my own social media. So I will follow you back and connect with you. It's me. It's really me online. I don't outsource anything human. So anything, if you just want to reach out or talk or message me, Twitter, but I'm Angela Maiers at every other platform, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of that. So you just type in Angela Maiers on that. So yeah, I know Nancy has to run and you guys have been diligent. So thank you for everything, Ling. Thank you so much for beautiful moderation. It's hard to rein us both in.
Nancy, if you need to log on, go ahead because I'm just
absolutely.
Okay, cool. And then when we say goodbye to Nancy, I just wanted to remind our audience that I really hope you found the session useful and that you feel better prepared to become an effective leader in today's digital age. And just to remind everyone, your attendance badge and a recording of this webinar will be sent to your email in the next 48 hours. And if you have any questions, you can always drop us an email at help@nexford.org. All right.
Perfect.
So, cool. And
Thank you,
thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye
Bye.
everyone. Bye.